Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Alice Hoffmann, an indie artist from Austria. Today we've got another Paintover critique and the artwork was submitted by RFR Eyes. Thank you very much. It's this portrait and it's based on a Draw This in Your Style challenge. So yeah, let's have a look at what we can do with it. First of all, in terms of the composition, I'd like to check the rule of thirds. And I'd say that at the cross sections of these thirds there isn't really anything significant. So I think what we can do is make the image a little bit wider so that the nose lands on the cross section of the right line. So this was just a very wild guess. But yeah, it turns out to be quite alright, I'd say. And for this Paintover critique, I'll work with this and just fill in the rest. Now I've got another problem though, because the hair is so close to the right edge that it's kinda making a tangent. And I don't really like that, so I'll just paint over it a little bit so that there's a slight bit more distance to the edge. Okay, this should be alright now. Let's have a closer look at the anatomy. And for that, I find it very useful to flip the canvas. And yeah, maybe you have noticed that our right eye is a bit high up, and I'd say the chin is very far to the left. So I'll try to fix it with the liquify brush. And what I will also do is make the neck a little bit slimmer. Because it's, according to the reference, I guess a girl. In that case, it's best to have a very slim neck. It is a very clearly feminine feature. And I'd say as a rule of thumb, you can kinda calculate the space of one iris to the next, I think, approximately, if you need a measuring tool. Yeah, I think that works better now. Then what I also noticed is that the eyebrow is very far inwards. So usually I'll just mark it a bit. The eyebrow goes somewhere like this, more or less, width-wise. So I'll try to copy it and move it around. Also, I think it could maybe look good to have it a bit higher up so that it gains some distance from the eye, because this distance is very small. It's hard to really measure it with like a certain rule. I think you're just going to have to do a lot of studies, and at some point you're going to have a good feeling about what seems right and what not. Okay, I think this will do. But what I'll also try is moving the eye around a bit. So you've got a semi-realistic style, and even if the eye is bigger, I think the position doesn't work in your favor. So in a realistic portrait it would be a bit more to the left, and I'll just try seeing what it looks like. Yeah, I think it's more harmonious this way. I'll try to keep it as close to your style as I can, because I think it's just good to see what your style that you chose can look like with a little tweaking. So I hope I won't change it too much and keep your vision intact, so to say. Okay, I'll try some liquefying on the eye for the anatomy. Because the lower lid seemed a little bit sharp, but not as if it was intentional. So I'll try some things and hope for the best. So I think it's a good idea in general to do multiple of these mirroring checks every now and then, because it can sometimes happen that you move stuff around and you get used to the look and then you move it in the wrong direction in some way again. So really do it multiple times. It really doesn't hurt and it doesn't cost extra. I think the mouth might still be a bit too much to the, originally to the right. It's a bit confusing to talk about while it's mirrored. Have to make sure I don't tell the exact wrong direction. Okay, I think this is looking more like it's supposed to. One thing I noticed is that the tongue has quite a lot of volume, so it has those bumps in your version, but images of tongues stretched out that I had a look at on Google are pretty smooth, so I'd say, smooth it out. You can try stuff like this for images in front of the mirror, or take your own reference images or look them up on Google. That's always a good idea because it's so easy to overlook little details like this. Also, given that the tongue is stretched, I'll weaken the shadow in the middle a bit. Because while it is stretched, I think it doesn't have a strong fold in the middle, if I remember that correctly. So, no guarantee, but I think it feels more correct. Alright, we can do a little check in between now. So this is what it was like before, and now with the changes. I hope you know what I mean, and that I didn't miss anything. So, then next up, the hand, I think, would benefit from some changes. First of all, I was a bit confused because it is cut off in this area. So apparently the hair covers it on that side, and I don't think it would naturally happen like this. It just looks more natural if the hand is in front of the hair. Because, if she would have it just in front of this bang section, or behind this section of hair bangs, she would have to sort of shift it in there, and it just doesn't happen in real life, I think. So yeah, I'll also edit the hand's anatomy a bit. I prepared a little reference of my own hand. It's not a great photo, but that doesn't matter. It's just for myself so that I know what the anatomy would have to look like approximately. Okay, so I'll edit the hand and just put it on a different layer so that I don't mess up anything around it. Also, what I noticed is that there isn't a thumb. Maybe that happened on accident, but yeah, not usually it would be something like this. Yeah, it can probably happen accidentally. So I'll also add the thumb back. This finger was a bit strongly bent. It can look cool for stylized art, but I think it's a bit dangerous to bend the fingers a lot because they can easily look broken at some point. So with the hands, there are many, many little proportions to look after and to keep in mind. So yeah, I can only repeat that working with references makes everything so much easier. And even with references, hands are so complex and there are so many things you can miss. So yeah, don't make your life harder than it needs to be. So these changes are pretty rough, but I hope they will do for now. Just to demonstrate the rough anatomy. So what you might want to do with this character, since you have the chance to show a fingernail, is, maybe some cute fingernail art. So I'll just pick some of the colors and I don't know, I'll just try to do a random design. Maybe not too long of a fingernail, but there are some kawaii art fingernails, maybe with like a cute character, something small. I think it adds to the storytelling of the image and describes the character a bit if you do something like this. I'll attempt to do a cute bunny, and I hope it won't look, I don't know, weird or anything. I think it will be fine. It's just really for demonstrating what you can do. Oh, there he is. And of course, yeah, you gotta add shading for this. I'll just do it with multiply and low opacity. And then I can just, throw it on top of everything, do a little overlay for the lights. And that's pretty quick. So what I didn't fix for the hand is the lighting direction, because in general on this image I have a sort of hard time knowing where the light comes from, because you see this finger has a rim light on this side, but it also has a main light over here on top. But I think, yeah, you probably wanted it to be front on and have a little backlight here, but it doesn't quite work because it looks weaker on the hair than on the fingers. Yeah, I probably won't have time to work on all this because I want to do other things with the face, which I think will do more for you. But for lighting direction in general, I'd say, doing form studies of simple objects will probably help you out a lot, and just studies of photos and master artworks. So yeah, I think this will really help you. I will, however, try to edit the shading of the face a bit and make the forms a bit clearer. So the thing is, the face is pretty complex like the hands, so portraits aren't really that easy of a subject. But of course I understand that we all want to do them, because it's just, there's something so satisfying about seeing a face for our psychology, I suppose. So given that this is a highlight color, I'll utilize it more on the cheeks. And as you can see, I'm doing very big areas that are super rough. Basically, this is what blocking is in digital art, and it's a very useful tool because you can roughly lay out your shapes and forms and just a general 3D feeling of, for example, this face. And it's not so much detail work, and you can still easily adjust it. So yeah, I would really recommend trying it out, because I think it could be that you started out with a sketch and then filled it in and then did all those shadows painstakingly and more or less zoomed in, perhaps, if I'm right. If I'm wrong, of course, correct me. But yeah, at least that was how I did it for a long time, and it's hard to describe, but something in your art reminds me of my art back then. So I hope it makes sense what I'm saying. Yeah. So what you generally want usually is for the nose bridge to have a very clear highlight, because it really describes the shape of the nose. I will also add more shadows under the hair, because if it's very bright, then it can be quite distracting, and a hair usually throws shadows on the surface below it. One thing I noticed is that the shadow of the underside of the nose is pretty dark compared to all the other shadows in the face. So if we do a little value check, you will notice that, for example, the shadow on the neck is very light. So most shadows in the face are very pastel-like and not that defined. So let's try to adjust that a bit. And yeah, I will also make the shadow of the nose a little bit less red, because I think it is quite red. So I'll add more general shadow on the neck. It also gets some shadow from the hair, I'd say. Then the lower end of the face also can use some definition. Side of the face. As you can see, I'm doing a really rough job, and maybe I'll get around to refining it a bit more, so don't worry. It won't stay like this. Hopefully. I think the bridge of the nose is a bit straight. Yeah, I think this works a little better. Also, I'm going to smooth out the neck some more because the character seems quite young to me, so I wouldn't recommend giving it too much definition. In general, with typically pretty characters, you can get away with smoothing out a lot of areas, and you know, like a Photoshop version of a celebrity's photo where, you know, okay, this is definitely not realistic, but people do those changes in Photoshopping for a reason. Okay, let's do another check with what it was like before. So I hope this helps already with the 3D feeling of the face. My rendering won't be very detailed, so of course you can refine it more if you decide to change your own art some more. One thing I'd like to try with the skin color is bringing in some hints of red at certain areas. For example, the cheeks tend to have more red. I'll just do it very roughly with a soft, huge brush. And on a very low opacity, because this can easily go wrong if you overdo it. Subtle changes like this can enhance the semi-realistic feel of a piece. So, okay, I added it at the cheeks, at the nose, a little bit at the lips and the eyes. And you see it's really subtle. If we go back to before the airbrush, you see it's very subtle. Because if you go on and give her super red cheeks, yeah, of course it can work too, but it can easily turn into some sort of makeup look more or less. So if you do it on purpose, okay, that's fine, of course, but yeah, do it consciously and be careful. Check maybe various versions of it. Yeah, that's not a bad idea generally. Okay, so now that we've got the skin, the face, everything, what I'd like to do is fix a little part of the design. So this is really nitpicky, but the original of the Draw This In Your Style has those hair clips above the eyebrows in a angled manner. So you see, those are in this sort of angle, and you've got them down here and in a different angle. So I'll just change this. because I think that the other direction is a pretty nice one, because it gives a little, I'd say, line contrast, shape, direction contrast. It seems to be pointing at the character, and that's what I like about it. And I'll also add a little shadow below them. Just a hint. Don't need much. So, merging. And I'll add a little bit of hair on top of it. Yeah, because the bangs are quite voluminous, and I don't think they would end just in front of the hair clips, if you know what I mean. Okay. In terms of painting technique, I'd like to experiment a little bit with the hair texture, because it's to me it feels like you had a bit of a struggle with the ends of the hair, because they seem like you used some sort of blending brush perhaps, and I don't know, if you from afar you notice the edge. And I think there might be a different way to do this. So what I generally use in a clip studio is a gouache brush in the oil paint section. And yeah, depending on your software, you might have something similar or may have the chance to download it. So this is basically a brush that imitates a realistic painting brush, and I think it's very practical. It is very versatile, and you can also use it for blocking, for example. And I think it also works nicely to draw hair texture. It just takes a while. So I'm using it on a kinda low opacity, and I'm just blocking in the hair. And the nice thing about the low opacity is that at the ends it's already fading out a little bit, so I don't need to use that much of a blending brush. And blending brushes sometimes have a very distinct look that, how to say it, it just sticks out very much, I think. And the brushes that imitate traditional ones, they seem more organic to most viewers. And again, like before, I'm doing very broad strokes, just blocking it in basically for now. And then I will refine it in the next steps. What I noticed down here, so you have a random highlight here. Light probably wouldn't reach the hair back there. So I'll change it around a bit. Okay, so now that I've got very rough shapes, I'll do very rough shadows on top. And these will help me define the whole hair shape very generously. And yeah, you see, it's really not any sort of rocket science, but it helps me get an overall definition for the form of the hair. I can treat all the hair structures like very rough building blocks. And only now that I know approximately where everything is landing, I'm starting to make my brush thinner and go on top of it. If I want, I can also now put in some more opacity, give it a crisper look. Yeah, and all of these little changes will determine how your style looks and everything. It's very fun to experiment with it. I'll keep the highlights a bit more unified, because if you have very small ones, it can look a bit like they are very separate, and sometimes the direction also doesn't match up and you don't really get a beautiful curve. So highlights on smooth hair, they usually land in sort of a curve, because the head shape is more or less spherical. Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do here now. Also very important to let these highlights and everything reach the edge of the image, because otherwise it can look like you are indirectly trying to do outlines, even though it's a painted piece. And a lot of people refer to this as line dependency. So it's a good keyword to search for if you want to work on this. There are lots of tutorials on the matter, like everything nowadays, which is so awesome. I'm so happy that if you are searching for help nowadays, you find a lesson on everything. It wasn't always this easy. Let's be honest. Oh gosh, back when I started to paint, sometimes I felt like I have to invent the wheel, because tutorials were very hit and miss, and sometimes I didn't find them very easy to understand, and in part people just didn't have techniques on how to work with software figured out that well yet, because it was all more or less new. I'm a fossil. Nah, just kidding. But yeah, I think online tutorials have come such a huge way. Honestly, you can even leave the hair more pretty rough like this. So from afar it looks pretty okay, I'd say. But you can of course bring back the detail and the love that you had. So sorry that I worked over it so roughly, but it's just to demonstrate a point. Yeah, you can maybe reach a similar, I'd say, a similar shape definition by working with multiply and all those layers. So I went over it with normal, and of course over time it just covers everything. But yeah. You can also try to bring in some stray hairs that have a little bit different rhythm. It breaks up the sort of those forms a bit and gives it some liveliness. So like you had on the left side, because I think at the face they were very irregular. And you can have fun with hair. It's so, I find hair so satisfying to paint, honestly. But maybe I shouldn't overdo it, because at some point her hair will look very disheveled, and it's actually pretty well kept, so yeah, gotta be careful with it. I would close this little hole, because I don't think it gives you much of an advantage. One thing I realized is that maybe the hand is a tad small. Can easily happen. So of course it's always best if you have all the important elements on separate layers, so you can also move it around a bit and experiment with the composition. That's always nice. So yeah, I think that's better. Especially since the hand is in front, so you might even try really overdoing it, like she's stretching it very close to the viewer. In that case, I would make it darker if you want to go that route. So let's try. Wait, I gotta do it differently. Can be pretty subtle. So yeah, just to get in more depth, because things in the foreground are usually darker if it's a normal light setting, and lighter in the back, which you might have seen in classical paintings, when there are, for example, mountains in the back, or even in photography, they tend to be paler and usually more blue if it's a clear blue sky day. So yeah, this is a possibility, but I'll keep it smaller and add her head just so that it's closer to the original. So overall, with the value check, the hair is framing the head nicely, but you have very, very similar values overall. I will try to get the background a bit different in that sense. And I want to do it by lightening it up a bit. I started with just the rough white fill for everything that's the background. And then I'll subtly try to bring it down. I mean, you can also try various layer styles if you want, but those can sometimes look a bit funky if they are too strong. So I'll just keep it on screen and do a little bit of it. Of course, this way you lose some of the saturation of the background, but I think it brings out the character a bit more. What we can also do is add darkness over the character, and maybe I'll do it with an overlay. We'll see. I'll just try some things. I'll try something different, but the good thing is, now that I have drawn this shape, I have the selection for the character. Maybe I'll do it with some tonal correction layers. What I will also do is turn down the saturation a bit, because the image is very vivid, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just can look a bit... so professional art tends to be not that far on the saturation side of the colors. And having it toned down a bit can give it a more refined look. So you can still have fun with your colors and bring them back in specific places. Like, for example, the eye is a colorful, important part. And you can, what I'm doing at the moment, for example, is using a mask. In case you haven't used those yet, they are very practical. So they basically mask out specific parts of the layers, and it's like erasing without erasing. You can still bring back the parts of the layer and they aren't lost. So what I am doing now is bringing back the saturation of certain parts of the image, and I will do a before and after, so it will be a bit clearer what this does. So this is the layer now, and if I disable the mask, then everything is desaturated. And it's very subtle now, but it still changes a little bit. I'm just bringing it back at the hair and the eyes, and the rest is still very desaturated. This is a very easy way of bringing interest to a certain part of the image of your choosing. What I'd like to do at the end now as well is just do a subtle little vignette. I know I throw vignettes on a lot of those paintovers, but they are just that good. They just frame everything, they work. I think they are just neat. Maybe for this image it would look nicer with a saturated color. Yeah, I like that a bit better. On the upper corner it might look better with blue. Yeah, more harmonious. Okay. I just noticed that somehow the upper lip now looks like there is a very slight beard. I'll fix the colors. I don't know how this happened, but sometimes, you know, over time, if one part is less saturated than the other, maybe that's how it happened. Yeah, I think now we've gotten rid of it. So in general, if you are stuck with an image, zoom out a bit. It's like the equivalent of real life stepping back from your image. If you've drawn something traditionally, it really helps you get perspective. Okay, one very last thing I'd like to do is pushing the lights a bit. And I'll just, again, do very rough paint over with a soft brush. And then I'll experiment with the layer styles. I also think the highlights of the hair were maybe a bit too saturated, so I'll try to change this as well. That's too much. So the first layer I got here is now just turning down the saturation to the level of this color. And it's very subtle, but I think it's more realistic. And then I'm having a screen layer, and it's just lightening it up more. And it's a very soft light. So depending on your style preference, you might not want it to be this soft. This is just a suggestion. You can take anything I say today or leave it. And yeah, I generally recommend it, but yeah, that's just me. I'll just paint in a little bit of light detail for the hair clips. Okay, I think I leave it at that, and I hope it helped you. I could be painting with it all day long because it's a lot of fun. I like portraits, but I don't really allow myself to do them very often. I don't know, I try to challenge myself and do like full poses and everything, but portraits are just so satisfying, and I hope you are having as much fun with painting it as I have with looking at it. And I hope today's paintover helped you, and keep going. You're at a good place and you will get much, much better. Okay, thank you. And if you would like to submit something for a future paintover, please do so. You can submit any sort of suited for work painting, can even be a comic if you want. You can reach me on all my social media or per email. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time. Bye!